August 2022 has come and gone, and that means it's time to take a look at everything that we came across during the month. So to start, let's take a look at what was offered by viewers, fans, and friends of the channel. First up is actually something quite different than what's usually seen. It's a letter from Professor Joseph Alexander Brown of Brock University, who wrote in saying how he and a colleague, Dr. Marco Scoria of the University of Southern Denmark, had been working on a scientific paper titled Evolving Woodland Camouflage, which relates to a method of creating camouflage patterns in digital games and how it could be used down the line for actual camouflage development. In it, he mentioned how they used some of the videos on the channel to learn about past camouflage tests employed by nations when determining what designs to adopt. Obviously, a lot more was used for the research, but it's still an amazing thing to hear. This channel was started to talk about the history and collectible aspects of various pieces of militaria and camouflage, and it's remarkable to hear the videos have reached an academic level, even if it's just in a small capacity. Thank you very much for reaching out with the letter and providing a copy of the paper. It was a fascinating read, and the future possibilities that can come from it are quite exciting. If you want to get a hold of a copy, you can find a link to it in the description. However, be known it is one that can only be obtained through a membership or one-time payment. Moving to actual uniforms, up next we have two unique camouflages. On the left, we have a Gore-Tex reversible US woodland and snow pattern. Now, this is an interesting piece as it's sort of a limited experimental type issue item that was seen during the late 80s into the 90s, where the US military was playing around with adopting a snow pattern which would replace their standard white oversuits. Ultimately, it never happened and white remained in use. The design itself, though, is pretty interesting as it's heavily influenced by the standard woodland pattern. Research into the series of limited use and experimental snow patterns tested by the United States is something we'll have to look into. But in the meantime, though, on the right is a practically brand new set of Serbian karst. This pattern was developed to be used in the mountains of Montenegro around the mid-1990s when Serbia and Montenegro were still a part of Yugoslavia, which eventually turned into the country of Serbia and Montenegro in 2003 until the two eventually became separate nations in 2006. This particular camouflage is more often seen on commercial pieces, and this one may be one, but even reproduction pieces are a tad hard to come by. Regardless of its status, it's still very much a great pattern to have in whatever form. Thank you so very much for offering these sets, Olivia Ritchie. They are both very much appreciated and will be of great use for topics covered in the future. Now, speaking of reproductions, here is perhaps one of the rarest ones out there, a set of South African giraffe camouflage. We covered this pattern in a two-parter a little while back, so if you want to learn all about its usage and how it became arguably the rarest camouflage pattern in the world, you can check those out. This set, though, is one of only a handful made in an attempt to keep it as accurate to the original as possible as far as the pattern goes. And being that almost every piece was destroyed and there's little in the form of photography, it's a bit hard to say exactly what was made in the pattern and exactly how much there actually were. But getting anything in this ultra-rare design is truly something. A very special thanks to Rhodey's Plaid for offering these. You can check him out on Instagram. Link to his account will be in the description. They are certainly a great addition. Thank you. We'll be sure to cover the Genesis project surrounding the creation of this design in a future video as well, as the process was quite interesting. Okay, up next we have a very subtle variant of the standard temperate flecktarn you'd think is from Germany. However, it's actually something of an experimental pattern from China that was tested by the People's Armed Police, PAP for short. This particular model is often referred to as Model A, with a B being seen as well. Over the years, China has played around with various flecktarn patterns, however they are often either short-lived or seen in small quantities, with the largest exception being the arid flecktarn, sometimes called Tibetan flecktarn, being seen spotted around 2003 by many border and interior forces of Western China. Still within China are three more interesting patterns. This particular one was also a short-lived design, tested and worn by both the PLA and PAP for a time. This particular uniform, though, was worn by armed police. The interesting element about the camouflage is its striking resemblance to the older Czech VZ95 in both color and shape. The last two are a newer digitized firefighter uniform. Once under the command of the armed police, they are now under the Ministry of Emergency Management, however continue to wear many uniforms and equipment inspired or copied off of their older cuts. One trend that many people made fun of was a series of vibrant red and orange designs many members wore. People would ask, why camouflage yourself into fire? Well, that was and still is sort of an issue, however, considering they are also used as search and rescue, disaster relief, and so on, having brightly colored uniforms does help to identify them and for people to see them easily when in emergency or disaster zones. Right next to it, and sort of offset it, is a blue pattern, specifically an older one worn by certain Marine garrisons stationed to defend certain reefs and smaller islands within the South China Sea during the late 90s and early 2000s. This pattern, along with a few other blue-based designs, were also criticized for their somewhat ineffective concealment capabilities, which continued into the Type 07 series of camouflages, which only just recently began being replaced. Finally, we have a somewhat common pattern, but from an uncommon country. This uniform is an older one worn by Marines of the United Arab Emirates, UAE for short. The chocolate chip design, as it has become commonly referred to, is often seen in more tans and browns. However, the second most seen version of it comes in these grayer color schemes, which have been seen in the past being used by other nations for various purposes, such as border guards. Alright, well that will about do it for this month. Again, a very special thanks to those who offered and sent in items. They are all certainly extremely unique and hard to get, and will most definitely help with future videos down the road. Thanks to all those who watched, and be sure to check back right here next month for more pickups. Take care, everyone.